Hi everyone, welcome to the Healthy Shift Worker podcast. I'm your host Audra Starkey. Today my guest Dr Valerie Giangrande is an optometrist, integrative nutrition health coach and quantum biology practitioner based in New York in the USA. With over 20 years experience working in private practice as an optometrist, it wasn't until when her son, at the age of 4, started to develop some health issues and soon after became frustrated by the lack of help she was getting from conventional medicine, started on a journey to becoming more holistic in her approach to wellness. Around 2018, she was introduced to quantum biology and the work of Dr. Jack Kruse, and after realising how crucial these foundational principles are to our overall health, including eye health, began to incorporate these principles into her own life and has been educating her patients in practice ever since. As an applied quantum biology practitioner, she now works with people who want help with quantum or circadian rhythm strategies as it relates to ocular health and overall wellness. It was such a pleasure talking with Valerie as she shares so many practical strategies in this episode to help support your most important circadian organ, that being your eyes. So thank you so very much for joining me, Valerie. I know that it's evening for you all the way over there in New
Yes.
York, but I really do appreciate you
Oh,
coming on to chat with me.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. I think this is going to be a really good session because so many of us have issues with our eyes in various different and shift workers also, because a lot of us are under artificial light, when we're normally asleep and those sorts of things. So I'm going to be interested to hear your perspective on if that's actually adding fuel to the fire in the degeneration of our eyes. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty questions, I'd love to hear how you got into becoming an optometrist, and then later on, I understand that you navigated down a little bit of a different path when it came to looking at different approaches with your health. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've always been interested in, of course, the science, the medical field. And I just gravitated toward optometry because it was a very nice way to understand the entire body and just kind of specializing in the eyes and still having to know everything about the body. And I really enjoyed that. And, as I had my own children, we started to have some health issues, and we started to realize that conventional medicine wasn't really helping us as much as we thought. So I started to delve into, we got help from functional medicine doctors, and I realized how great that service was. And we saw some really big improvements, and I ended up becoming a little more holistic over time. And then I became an integrative nutrition health coach just to try to learn more, because with my patients, I started to talk a lot about nutrition and health, and it started to become a little more holistic, but I'm in a very conventional office. So I said, let me at least have a health coaching background. Yeah. And then with my own health issues, I ended up going to my own doctor, and he asked me about sun exposure. And I really thought he was joking, because I was, conditioned and we learned to avoid the sun as an eye doctor. Wear your sunglasses, hide from the sun, and put on your sunblock. So when I discovered this information, it just blew my mind, and it completely changed everything. And since then, I've just become this quantum practitioner. So now I've incorporated the quantum world in my practice and with my family since about 2018. So it's been quite a few years now that I've been doing this. But I've recently been certified as a quantum biology practitioner. It's exciting.
Yeah. Fantastic. Sounds like you've been on a long journey and obviously being in the industry for a while. Yeah. All right. Now, I love that. I think what you mentioned about this avoiding the sun exposure is a great segue to my next question, is that, as you said, we have, obviously you're over in the United States, and here in Australia, we are the same. We're really told that we need to avoid the sun, always wear sunglasses, put on sunblock. From what you've seen in your clients, where the difference between what might be natural UV exposure versus artificial light exposure, what's doing the most damage in your point of view? It's a big
So
question, I
I
know.
would say, right. So I would say most people, most of my patients at this point in time are not people who spend all day outside. If
Hmm.
they do, I would say, ultraviolet light can cause some issues, but I would say the majority of people, and I'm not sure how it is in Australia, but everybody's indoors on their screens
Mm.
day and night. We have the children on in school, they're on computers all day, people are in their offices. So I would say artificial light to me is causing more problems than anything else. And for so many reasons. I mean, we're wired for sunshine. Our whole body is run by light. So when we're exposed to an artificial signal of light that's nothing like sunshine, it causes a lot of trouble, and it can actually lead to a lot of different eye conditions and a lot of health issues as well. I don't know if you want me to get into the reasons
Please
why
go
that
for it.
happens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what I tell people is that, we're actually wired for sunshine. That light is actually how we communicate in our bodies. So if we look really deep, deeper than the chemistry of our bodies, deeper than food, the electrons that are running our body are based on light. Sunshine, when it's full spectrum sunlight, is what we're wired for. So in a perfect world, when that sun rises, it has blue light, there's red light, there's infrared light. And we have cells in our eyes that are not just designed to see. We have cells that are waiting for that particular signal of light to tell our brain what time it is. So sunrise light tells our brain then when we see that blue light, it's time to start the day. So the clock in our brain starts releasing cortisol. We start starting our day, and everything works the way it's supposed to. And then the sun has all the different parts of it, and we start making hormones through our eyes as ultraviolet light starts to show up. We actually make our melatonin from sunshine through our eyes in the
Mm.
morning, and then we release it at night. So all of these things that we're not used to being outside without sunglasses, but we need those signals through our eyes. Now, blue light, when it's giving the body a timestamp, it's actually creating inflammation, or it's an oxidative stress. And that's the way we communicate. And that's okay, because in the sun, it's always balanced by red light. There's always red light, there's infrared light, and that's always going to balance out the inflammation that we get from blue light. But when we're indoors and we have this artificial signal of blue,
Mm.
that oxidative stress is really just creating stress, and there's nothing balancing it because it's not like regular sunshine. And it's the same color of the sun at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So when we're exposed to that light, our body works like it's supposed to at 12 o'clock in the afternoon all day and night, depending on when we're exposed to that. So we get a lot of this inflammation that doesn't stop. And then that cortisol production will start to keep our hormones in a different level, and all the other processes. It creates a whole host of problems.
Mm. Yeah, and I think we're obsession that they talk about vitamin D and sunlight. I think we need to also flip it
Mhm.
that we're deficient in vitamin D from a vitamin D perspective. Would you agree?
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. Vitamin D, so many people are taking it as a supplement. And when I tell people it's not the same as making it, I mean, we need to make it through our skin from that UVB exposure. And as we know, it's that UVB in the sky has to be at a 30-degree angle or greater, and the UV has to be 3 or greater. So in New York, that only happens from, I don't know, April to November. And obviously it's the opposite in Australia, but it doesn't happen all year round. And we need our skin to be exposed, but we also need our eyes to be exposed to that same signal. So that when we're trying to make vitamin D, if we have sunglasses on, our brain doesn't see the same signal as our skin, and we won't upregulate vitamin D production in our skin. So that's how we end up burning. So most of us are taking that vitamin D, but it's not the same as making it, because when we make it, it's sulfated, and there's all these different metabolites of vitamin D that really help our body. It actually lowers cholesterol because it's made from cholesterol. So it helps with every aspect of our body. And when we take it, it's just not the same, although most of us are deficient. So it seems to be what most people do, is that we end up taking it, but it's such a problem.
Yeah, it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, isn't it? Just to treat it with a pill instead of
Hmm.
looking at the holistic perspective. So, how about though in people that live in places that don't necessarily get a lot of sunlight per se? Is just being outside, like for example, where I'm at the moment, it's actually raining and overcast.
Hmm.
Is it beneficial still for people to go outside?
Absolutely, absolutely. The sun will always have about 42% of infrared light and red light, and that's always going to come through the clouds. It doesn't matter. And the
Hmm.
signal that we need, our eyes are wired for even a few photons of light. We need that particular balance of light through the clouds. It doesn't matter what time, what it looks like outside. We absolutely need that same signal, which is very different from our indoor lights that we're getting. So it doesn't matter. It's a little hard to get out there in the winter when it's cloudy, when it's raining. But even sometimes I just open my window and I crack it open and I just stand there with the rain falling just to get a little bit of that signal to try to start the day that way, or again throughout the day if we can.
That's great, and at least it gives it some people some options when the weather may not might put us off a little bit. So, all right. Now you also touched on the sunglasses, which is a bit of a debate. So I'm kind of glad that I'm talking to an optometrist on this subject, because you see firsthand the some of the negative effects of sun damage to the eyes. If there's people
Yes.
listening and they're hearing this for the first time, oh my gosh, there's optometrists, they're telling me that wearing sunglasses is not a good thing. What can you say to them?
So it's not a good thing all of the time. Yeah, it's not a very popular opinion. I understand that. What I will say is that when the sun is rising, there is no UV in that early morning sun for at least an hour. Our eyes have UVA receptors. We have the melanopsin receptors. We have blue light receptors. We need that sunshine to get through our eyes. That's where the clock is, right in our brain, behind our eyes. So if people are afraid of getting that ultraviolet light, sunrise doesn't have any of that ultraviolet light. It's very soothing. It's very red. And then about an hour after sunrise, when the UVA just starts to show up, it's so mild. It's a UV level of 1. We have UVA receptors on our cornea, and we have amino acids in our eyes that are accepting of UVA. So there's no mistakes. I mean, we need that signal again to make our hormones, or to start making hormones. So I'm not suggesting that we stare at the sun, and I'm not suggesting that we never wear them. I mean, if you're someone who's outside all day and that UV is very strong, and you need to protect yourself, say if you're driving or you're on the water and all the reflections, or you're skiing, if you're exposed to snow, of course, too much UV is not a good thing, but most of us just don't spend that much time outside. So I'm talking about people who are indoors most of the time, and to go outside, to walk to your car, don't wear them. We need that sun as much as we can, even throughout the day, even when that UVB is there. And again, UVB, we cannot make vitamin D if we're wearing sunglasses. If you're someone who really likes those sunglasses and you're really light sensitive, then start early. Pull them down first thing in the morning. It's a really good way to start getting the eyes used to natural sunlight. I find that people who do wear sunglasses all the time and spend a lot of time indoors are even more sensitive to light. It's like they no longer can handle any sunlight because they've gotten so used to avoiding it. So early morning sunshine, start with 2 minutes. Then build up. Start with 4 minutes, 5 minutes. You don't need that much sun to make a big difference in the body. But I don't want people wearing them all the time, especially in the morning, especially when UVA is rising. And again, in the middle of the day to make that vitamin D and get those benefits. And then at sunset. Those are all really good times to at least start not wearing them. Very safe. As long as you're not staring directly at the sun.
Yeah, great. And I love that you mentioned it, that it helps to reset our circadian clocks, with a clock in the brain. For shift workers, that is huge, because our circadian timing system is upside down all over the place. So, and I think that's a great little strategy to start to implement. Although, and when you're talking about the glare, I think I used to wear sunglasses, so I can relate to what you're saying, but I haven't worn them in years, and I don't notice that glare anymore. So
you get used to it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We haven't. Me too. We evolved to wear them, did we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, how about for our listeners that stuck under artificial light? Like, I'm talking about our listeners that might be working in a hospital, they might be working in a call center, in an airport, or something like that, where they're stuck indoors under a lot of artificial light at night. How can they protect their eyes because we shouldn't be seeing darkness. It is what it is.
Absolutely. So right now I am wearing blue light blockers. These are I would say these are more of a daytime blocker. So the sun didn't set yet. So these are the glasses that I have on. However, after sunset, I tend to wear these. These are orange. They do block blue light, all of that blue light. I also have red for sleep, which that I wouldn't recommend because I will fall asleep within an hour of wearing those. But if people aren't embarrassed by wearing these, I feel like this might be the best way to block that artificial blue light at night. However, it can have the potential to make people tired, and that's my only concern because it does.
Yeah.
When blue light shuts down the release of melatonin, so that when we blocking blue, melatonin gets released. So we do have the potential to get tired. So I hesitate to say, we have to see how these would work. But even something like this would at least block, some of that blue. And the other thing we have to remember is that we have blue light receptors on our skin as well. So even if our eyes are protected, if a lot of our skin is exposed to that signal, it's also causing that same oxidative stress, even in our skin. So perhaps wearing, some kind of covering, like some kind of long sleeves. Not that you would wear a hat at work, but just something that would cover as much skin as possible and the eyes. And then I guess when the shift is over, although I would imagine we need to sleep after that shift and not see the sun right away because that would disrupt the system as well. But I would imagine getting sun as soon as you wake up would be the best thing to do as far as safety.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. That's really, really good. And as you said, depending on people's positions, they need to still remain alert. But I like that protective mechanism because it's mitigating. At least we can't remove it completely, but at least
there is a setting. If there are people who are on screens overnight, there are some programs that actually. I don't know if you're aware of the Iris technology program, and then there's something called F-Lux. I feel like Iris technology might be a bit better. It actually mimics the sun, so at night it would be very red. So at least you're not getting, that red screen, and that might be difficult to mitigate in a hospital setting where we really probably not able to change the computer settings in a hospital. So that might be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
maybe an IT department would do that.
Yeah. Have you heard of anything that can be placed over a computer screen or something that would help to mitigate that? Is there such? I've never really looked into that.
I actually have one in my office. We have an IT department, and I'm not able to download that Iris technology program. So I'll wear something like this during the day. But I also have a screen that I put over. I bought it on Amazon, and it's a blue light protection. I think it's called VisoBlue, and I put it right on my screen. So again, it's not. It's still letting some blue light through because the color is pretty clear, but at least there is some protection, and it's also protecting, I guess, some of that skin as well. It's really the overhead lights that we have to worry about as well, I guess, when we're in any kind of setting that's artificial. So I'm wondering if there's any way, I don't know if people could wear hats, but we really, that overhead light sometimes can be a little damaging as well. Even if you're wearing glasses, it can come in from above. Yeah. So that might be a little bit of an issue. I'm not sure how to mitigate that very well unless you're able to cover up.
Yeah. That would be an interesting look if everyone comes in wearing hats into a hospital. Although, actually, nurses used to. Looking back 100 years ago, maybe sometimes the nurses, their outfits, they did have hats on. So maybe they knew something that we didn't back then.
Bring back the hats.
Bring back the hats. I'll probably get a lot of people going, don't suggest that. No. Please don't suggest that. Yeah. So that's actually really quite helpful information, Valerie. I've just been starting to do a little bit of research when it comes to the influence of light exposure on our blood sugar levels, because I wanted to touch on this topic because shift workers, unfortunately, because of the chronic sleep deprivation and the circadian disruption, they are prone to things like insulin resistance and eventually type 2 diabetes. What's the correlation on, because we have this food focus, which I'm not discounting. I trained in nutrition. I get the correlation there. But is there something else we're missing when it comes to light exposure that may actually be exacerbating those symptoms?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of things. So one, our digestive system has its own clock. So it's all linked. In a perfect world, we wake up in the morning and that's when our digestive enzymes start to work. And that's when we're supposed to eat within the window of sunshine, because that's when our digestive enzymes are quite high. So after sunset, when our brain gets a signal that it's still 12 o'clock in the afternoon, cortisol is released. And we know that cortisol at the wrong time. Now, with that blue light at night, when cortisol is released, it's going to automatically increase our blood sugar. It's going to stress our bodies out. It increases insulin, and it also has an effect
Mm.
on leptin. So leptin is a hormone that tells our brain that we're full. And when our body becomes leptin resistant, then we get insulin resistance. We have the too much cortisol, and we end up having a really big risk for diabetes just because of light at the wrong time. We're not
Yep.
meant to eat as much when the sun goes down because, again, our digestive enzymes are a lot lower. So when our body thinks it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, we think it's lunchtime, and it stimulates our appetite and our blood sugar. Absolutely. It's one of the, it's actually quite a big risk factor, just light in general. So I have a lot of patients who say, I eat so well, I don't even eat carbs, and my blood sugar is still high. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? They're like, well, my lights are on. I sleep with the TV on, and I'm on my phone at all hours of the night. And I said, it's really that light that causes a big shift in blood sugar. Absolutely. At the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge topic, isn't it? That's not really spoken about.
It
We
is.
we talk a lot about the food and exercise, and
Mm-hmm.
I just think of so many of my shift working clients that have the insulin resistance and pre-diabetes, but they're blissfully aware of the correlation of the damaging lights. At home,
Mm-hmm.
can't blame it at work all the time, but at home as well. When you were saying before with the
Right.
TV on and the iPhone, and we're all kind of guilty of it to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. Now you mentioned again, I was been doing a little bit of stalking on your social media because I
Go.
love some of the content
Yes.
that you've been putting out. But I love that you made mention to say that the eye is a hormone making organ. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you delve into a little bit about that and also maybe touch on it from a mental health perspective as well?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So it has to do again with the timing of the sun. So
Mm-hmm.
as soon as we have the cortisol production that gets made from melanopsin we have in our eyes, so that when we have that blue light, it literally starts making cortisol, and it's like a pharmacy in our brain. It starts all of the hormones. But again, that UVA is probably the most important. That's what I consider when I say the eye is a hormone making organ. I'm talking about that UVA rise about an hour after sunrise, because that's when those neuropsin cells get activated that are accepting UVA, and the amino acids are collecting ultraviolet A light. And it's actually making dopamine, it makes serotonin, we make we start making melatonin, we make the thyroid hormones, we even make norepinephrine and epinephrine. So all of those hormones are being made that affect our mood and our stress levels and our energy. But from a mental health standpoint, I mean, dopamine and serotonin, we need those hormones just to, to be even keeled, to be happy, to do all of those things. So we see a lot of people, especially young people at night, who are on their phones, and they're not getting the right sleep, and they have that artificial blue signal, that are actually not making the right hormones, right? So now they're lacking dopamine. All they're getting is cortisol and all the other hormones, and it affects sex hormones and all of these other things. But we're lacking that melatonin release, the serotonin. There's a lot of depression, and there's a lot of anxiety, and for so many reasons, because the eye is a hormone making organ that actually connects to the brain, and it really does start in the eye. So if we are always missing that light, if we're missing sunlight through our eyes, we're not making those hormones, and it does cause a lot of mental health issues as well. Hope that answered your question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm really hoping our listeners are really tuning in to what you've just said then from a mental health perspective again, because that's something that shift workers struggle with for various different reasons. But again,
Mhm.
there's the beauty of the benefits of something that's free, sunlight, getting outside.
One thing I didn't mention as well, when we're exposed to sunlight, we actually release beta endorphins. We actually release these happy hormones. And that's another thing that makes us kind of addicted to sunshine. That's one thing that I didn't mention. And the other thing, when I say no sunglasses, I also mean no contact lenses, unfortunately, and no glasses. Contact lenses are covering, most contact lenses block ultraviolet light. And the companies love that. They boast
Wow.
about it. And unfortunately, we
Wow.
really need that ultraviolet light, again, in small doses, but we do need it. So
Mm.
when I say no sunglasses, I mean, no glasses, no contacts or glasses, especially at those key times, because we really want everything to be made properly. And then we also need, again, that darkness at night to try to modulate it correctly. Which, again, I know that we're talking about shift work and it does make it very difficult.
But that's okay. There's always ways, and we're not always at work all
Mm-hmm.
the time too. So I love what
Right.
you're sharing is obviously
Mm-hmm.
replicable. When they're not at work. So that's
Right.
interesting that you're talking about contact lenses. I used to wear them a long time ago. I don't anymore. I just found that they get a little bit gritty after a while. So from an optometrist perspective, if you're encouraging somebody
Mm-hmm.
to wear glasses versus contacts, what would you recommend and why?
Gosh, this is a tough question because I mean, I do both. Obviously, I'm in a practice where for 20 years, and a lot of patients wear contacts and a lot of patients wear glasses. I think there are pros and cons to both. I find
Mm,
that with contacts, most people overwear their contacts, and that's a big problem. And they wake up and they put them on and they wear them for 16, 17 hours, and they give their eyes no
mm,
break. And that's where you start to see more dryness. You start to see blood vessels growing into the eye because the body is lacking oxygen. It's really tough. With glasses, you can pull them down much easier.
mm.
Glasses give us a little bit of trouble in the periphery. Sometimes people feel like they're being hidden, by wearing glasses. So some people don't
Yeah.
like that feeling. With contacts, it does open up their world a bit. But I think as long as contacts are taken care of properly and not overworn, there are some lenses that don't block UV, which are actually perhaps a bit better. But I
Mm,
think it's all in moderation. It's just definitely not to overwear them. I would say that's the most important thing when it comes to contacts. And glasses
mm,
too. If glasses are meant for distance, then we shouldn't be wearing them for reading, or we shouldn't. There's certain times, unless we should never overwear anything when it comes to
mm.
glasses or contacts. That's usually what I tell people.
Okay. I'm sitting here feeling very guilty for that because, yes, I used to wear my contact lenses for way longer than I should have done, but it was, yeah,
They're
the
convenient.
convenience
I get
thing.
it. I get it.
But I now
Mhm.
kind of think,
I
was
mean,
it
it's
smothering my eyes, as in not letting the eyes breathe, potentially? I know that they're all different, but
so. So some say that they do let more oxygen through, but they're disrupting the tear film a bit, right? That they're disrupting
mm,
the microbiome of our tear film. They're disrupting the air. I mean, we're getting oxygen from the air, and we're not really getting that. It causes some issues. Sometimes we get this like this microscopic swelling that you can't really see, but that's where the dryness comes from, especially people who, God forbid, who sleep in their contacts. That's probably one of the worst things we can do, because
yeah.
the eyes do swell up from becoming lack of oxygen. So yeah, I mean there
Wow.
is some smothering there.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, it is what it is. So how about things
Hmm.
like the formation of cataracts? Is that again, what are your takes on that from a natural spectrum sun
So
exposure versus inside?
right.
Hmm.
So again, my training, of course, ultraviolet light causes cataracts all the time. That was a big thing. Always wear your sunglasses. And of course, there are people who come from the islands. They have a lot of cataracts. They're in the sun all day. Absolutely. I think UV is
Okay.
something that can cause cataracts. However, again, in our modern world, we are not outside all day. And I would say that artificial light and health issues that are linked to circadian rhythm, diabetes, blood pressure, people who have asthma and use steroid, different medications, different health issues, they all contribute to cataracts. There are so many people with cataracts, and they're not outside. They're inside. They're on their screens all day. They're taking a ton of medications. They never get sunshine. They stay up late. It's just so many things. So I feel like blue light is one of the bigger causes of cataracts in our modern world these days. Because again, blue light that's unbalanced is very oxidizing, and our lens is made up of collagen. And collagen has to be hydrated. And the only way for collagen to be hydrated is if our energy cells are working. Our mitochondria need a lot of energy to make that water to surround, just to keep ourselves hydrated, to keep us healthy. And sunlight, full spectrum sunlight, does that for our bodies. So it's really interesting how much the modern world has changed so much in healthcare. But I will say cataracts are happening in younger people than I'm used to seeing. And I've been in practice for 20 years. So now I feel like younger people are getting cataracts a little bit more frequently. And it's not people that are outside, really. Not very much these days.
Also, and the mobile phones being so close to our eyes,
Mm-hmm.
that has to be having some kind of an effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to ask you, sort of steering off track a little bit, because I know that you've done a little, a bit of nutrition training. What do you recommend that can help with our to support our eye health from a nutrition perspective? And is there something?
So, as far as diet, um, the most important nutrient that we need for our eyes, in particular for the whole body, is DHA from
Mm-hmm.
seafood. We used to, I mean, years ago, I would recommend fish oil supplements, and now I wish I didn't, because a lot of fish oil supplements are rancid. I mean, they're very oxidized very quickly, and they're in the wrong form, so it's very hard to absorb. So at this point, it's so much better to just get DHA from our food, from seafood. Grass-fed animal meat, it has a lot of DHA, so we need healthy fats. We want to avoid seed oils. It used to be people think carrots are so useful, and that's not really. It's really more
Yeah.
of the healthy fats. We want grass-fed meat. We want pastured eggs. We want even coconut oil. These healthy oils are much better for us than seed oils, of course. As far as supplements, it does depend. So I hesitate to recommend supplements at this
Mm,
point. I used to all the
mm,
time. Really, I
mm.
did. Some people people who take statins, I always tell them they should be taking CoQ10. It's a little different,
Yep.
CoQ10, because that's very helpful for our mitochondria and the eyes and all of that. That's a specific
Yep.
case. Sometimes I take it, once in a while. I find that for myself these days, I am making sure that I have a lot of minerals, that the water that I drink is full of minerals, and it's healthy water. I structure my water a little bit. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
make sure
Big one.
that yeah, that
Big
most of
one.
the food, it's whole foods, organic foods, if you can, just to reduce any toxins. Anything that's bad for the body is going to be bad for the eyes. Obviously, smoking, all of those things, alcohol, those things are not going to be good. I'd hesitate to tell anybody to really take melatonin. Anything that we make, I try not to tell people to take. So those are the things that I used to.
Mm,
But
mm,
now I've changed my tune a little bit. It's like vitamin D and melatonin. I would say probably don't, try not to use too much of that, because we make it and it disrupts the our own production, or the
yep.
feedback loops that we naturally have.
Mm,
Same thing with glutathione. A lot of people say that glutathione is a really good thing to take, that detox, but again, we make it. So I hesitate to recommend that as well, although we do need a lot of glutathione, of course. But that would just be taking care of our liver, making sure that we're digesting our food. And sometimes digestive enzymes are helpful if we think we're not, absorbing our nutrients. What else?
mm.
My mind is a
Yeah.
lot of
There's
information going on here. Trying to
yeah. I mean,
trying to think of other things that I would recommend. And yeah.
you've covered a huge amount just then, Valerie, an enormous amount. I also used to encourage supplementation, but now I've really pulled back a lot with that, and more from a food first perspective, and particularly when you're mentioning the vitamin D and the melatonins and so forth. They are a hormone, and I think people aren't really aware. Most people aren't aware that they are a hormone, and your body, as you said, already makes it. So we are potentially in with the body in a way that we
Hmm.
really shouldn't be. Another topic that I wanted to talk to you about. Yep.
And even fulvic acid, or those
Mm,
minerals. Like I said, I've been
mm.
using a lot of minerals lately. Those are the things that I would say as far as supplements that might be a little bit more on the safer side that I'm okay with. And red light therapy isn't a whole other. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. From that is, you're right. It's a whole nother world as well, because again, that's
Hmm.
pulling one of the beneficial parts of the full light spectrum. So I love that. Where I wanted to sort of head towards now, Valerie, is that again, I hate to say it, because shift workers, we're just so prone to a lot of chronic health conditions, and again, another one is high blood
Hmm.
pressure or hypertension.
Hmm.
Again, now
Yes,
you
yes,
touched on this from a eye health perspective. Can you please, pardon the pun, shed some light on the correlation between
absolutely.
hypertension and eye health?
Yes. So once again, the sunlight, ultraviolet light, actually, when it hits our skin, creates nitric oxide. It releases nitric oxide, and nitric oxide will dilate. Can you still see me? Because the sun is starting to set. Am I too
Yeah,
dark
no, no,
here? Can you
no,
see
you're
me?
fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's getting darker.
That is
Anyway,
fine.
so when nitric oxide is released, our blood vessels dilate. And that actually lowers our blood pressure. It actually allows more blood to flow. So when we're lacking sunshine, our blood pressure is higher. So just as simple as getting sunshine in our skin. And it also makes nitric oxide even through our eyes. And there's a lot of research showing that nitric oxide lowers eye pressure and glaucoma, and there's other things. But as far as hypertension, did you ask me how it affects the eyes? Hypertension. I mean, our blood vessels, if
Or
they're exposed
general,
to
yeah. Yep.
in general, yeah. So
Mm.
a couple of ways the sun can help other than the nitric oxide. There is also just the rhythm in general. Our blood flow is on a rhythm. We need sun to have our mitochondria make the correct amount of water. And that water is what hydrates the inside of our body. It's not the same as the water that we drink. We make something called exclusion zone water, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, but
No, please
exclusion
go for it.
zone.
This is fairly
Oh,
new, and I'm sure probably
oh,
most of my listeners would not have heard of it. So, yeah, go for
okay.
it.
So I'll backtrack a little bit because this
Yep.
plays a huge role in our overall health and our
Mm,
blood pressure.
mm,
So our mitochondria, which are those are our energies, the powerhouse of our cells. That's what gives us
mhm,
our energy. It's powered by light. And when mitochondria is exposed to red light in particular, it makes water. Same thing with infrared light, helps us to make more water. And all of this improves our mitochondria. Now, what's so interesting about the water that's made is that when mitochondria make water, the water inside our cells, it becomes like a gel. It's not the same as the
mhm.
water we drink. It's actually, it's called an exclusion zone because it structures itself around every single molecule in our body that attracts water. So imagine that it covers every single cell, everything, every piece of collagen, every protein, every DNA is surrounded by a shell of water. And that water is what gives our body its battery power. It allows electrons to flow. The reason why it's called an exclusion zone is because it has a zone of electrons, it's negative, and it pushes everything else out of it. It excludes everything. And then there's a zone of positive protons. And that exclusion zone, because it's full of electrons, that's how we communicate. Electrons are light signals, and that's our battery power for the entire body. We need exclusion zone water to actually cover the inside of all of our blood vessels. Everything is covered by exclusion zone water. But in order for our blood to flow, we need a really nice level of exclusion zone water on the inside of all of our blood vessels. And that pushes blood through very easily. So when we're dehydrated, say we're getting too much blue light, our body's dehydrated, we don't make a lot of water. When we're exposed to Wi-Fi, we don't make a lot of water. When we don't get a lot of sunshine, ultraviolet light gives that water electrons. Infrared light expands that water. And red light is what gives the mitochondria the power to make that water. And that is probably the most important thing because it's literally our voltage. And our blood pressure it goes up. If we're dehydrated, our body has to push more of that blood through. So there's some in the quantum world, we think of the heart as more of a something that just kind of structures our water as opposed to, the force of our water. A lot of it comes from that exclusion zone water that pushes blood throughout the body. And that's how we keep our blood pressure lower, by doing all of those things that keep our water flowing. We can also get electrons from putting our feet on the earth, from grounding and getting those electrons. So hypertension from lack of sunshine, we have there's low nitric oxide, low exclusion zone water. And when those vessels in the eye are exposed to that high pressure, they start getting very thin. They can get very hard. They start crossing over veins. They start pushing on blood supply. And then you can get a whole host of other issues. I mean, sometimes you can get leakage. You can have veins that burst in the eye. You can have optic nerve issues. There's a lot of different things that can happen from blood pressure just based on looking in the eye, which is really interesting because it's a part of the body that you can see without cutting. You can see vessels without having to cut the body open, and you can see the health of the body just by looking at those vessels. It's really interesting. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm forgetting about blood pressure. I feel like there's more. Lymph flow is also has to do with the exclusion zone water as well. And we need our lymph to flow throughout the body, and all of our toxins to be removed. I mean, we need it for everything. Yeah, I guess that's it. And then, of course, circadian rhythm. If our cortisol is released at night at the wrong time, that's going to keep our body more stressed, right? It's going to hurt our heart a little bit because we're not able to release that melatonin, which is really what calms us down. Our blood pressure does have a rhythm. There's a clock to our blood pressure. It's supposed to be a little bit lower at night with melatonin, but when we're on the wrong schedule, it can increase our blood pressure as well. So I think that covers most of what I think that covers it.
My brain's sort of
I know
exploding just listening to you.
I
No.
speak so quickly. I'm from New York. I'm like, sorry.
No, that's all good. But it is just, it's so, particularly, for people hearing this sort of information for the first time, it really is, or for me it was anyway, like real penny dropping moments to hear that our mitochondria actually, help to generate water. I mean, seriously, that's
Yes.
never heard
Yes,
that
I know. It's
before.
very interesting.
Yeah, but and
I don't know
powerful
this later.
too. These are sorts of things that, again, if we can reverse engineer it and get more in tuned into nature as best as we can with the light exposure, we are helping to increase our energy as opposed to reaching for the
Mm-hmm.
Red Bull energy drinks, multiple cups of caffeine.
Exactly.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. Wow.
Yes.
And I probably should have asked this question right at the beginning. Sorry, Valerie, but could you explain to our listeners what is quantum biology? Because that is obviously a big facet of what you were just explaining about just then.
Yes. Absolutely. So quantum biology is the deeper level of study for how we work. So when we think about health or the way the medical field thinks of health, we always think of biochemical reactions,
Yep.
a hormone hitting a receptor and how that works. But quantum biology goes a little bit deeper. So if we go to a deeper level, we're going to the level of electrons, of the atomic level of actually what's happening below the biochemistry, below everything. We're really just electrons and neutrons and protons and how all of that is happening on that atomic level. And if we look at that level, we see that electrons react with light. So everything that we do is controlled by light. So if we really go deeper, no matter what we do, it's light that controls everything. So while food is important and exercise is important, we're really just light if we come down to it. Even when we're eating food, we're eating light because wherever food is grown, it's collecting light. And
Yep.
what we're doing is taking that message of light and just reversing it. And we're releasing light. Every cell in our body is always releasing light. The electrons, it's just a light show. So light controls every aspect of our physiology, which is why it's so important. And we don't think of that. And now they changed all of our lights to LEDs and we're lacking infrared. We're all just
Yeah.
so light deficient.
Yep.
There's not a lot of infrared light. There's no red light. It's just blue. Everything is blue.
Yeah. That's so very true. Our world is definitely upside down. Like I said before, it's not just vitamin D from the sun; it's vitamin darkness we're deficient in, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I know I'm mindful of the time, and I know that it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
late for you. So I just want to look at wrapping up with a few more questions for you. Are there
Sure.
any
Sure.
from an optometrist kind of perspective here, are there any
Mm-hmm.
exercises that you would recommend to help improve our sight? Is there such a thing? Does it make a difference that may potentially help us that have short-sightedness or long-sightedness? Have you done much or know much
So
about
that's a
that?
great question. That's a great question. And I do think that there are exercises to help. I'm not a vision. I don't do vision therapy. I don't really do that in my practice.
Okay.
That's not to say that they don't help. So I really don't
Yeah.
tell people about exercises just because I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
But I have been looking into a lot of those. There's the Bates method. There's all these different methods of help. And you see people do have significant improvements. I will say that people who are nearsighted, we have to be really careful about reading with the glasses. If you're someone if the glasses are meant for distance and we
Yep.
read with them too much, that tends to
Yep.
make prescriptions worse. As far as exercises,
Okay.
I mean, nothing that I can, I'm not good. I'm not able to answer that very well just because I don't know. I don't really have a good answer. There are
Yeah.
people who do vision therapy and there's developmental optometrists that really work well in this field, but I'm not as familiar with that. So I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. It's obviously something that you haven't gone down. But I just sometimes think that even from
Right.
taking my glasses off, looking away from the computer and up in the distance, and is that
Oh,
all meant to help?
absolutely.
Is
Yeah.
it meant to help
So with
the
computers,
aging process?
what I do tell people What I do tell people with computers is to make sure you're looking slightly down at an angle at a screen, because if you're looking at a screen that's up or higher, you're forcing your eyes to stay open a lot more, and that's going to dry them out. And it's not good for our muscles to always be looking up at an angle. So I do always say look down. The other thing,
Okay.
we're supposed to blink. We're supposed to blink every 10 seconds. That's how our eyes are refreshed with our tear film. And when we are looking at a screen, that blink rate really does go down. So it automatically just keeps us in this state of being stiff and not blinking. And that's not good either. So yeah, as you said, you definitely want to look across the room, look out the window as much as you can, because every time we look in the distance, those muscles do relax. So we do want to look away and not focus on a screen as much as we can. Obviously, getting up and moving, every time we move our body releases electrons. I mean, it's just we have a lot of movement. Even movement helps that water flow, and our eyes are full of exclusion zone water as well. So any movement that we can do is going to be helpful. I just don't have any specific exercises that I would know of to
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah. No, that's okay. And I think that's really good that you're talking about from a suggestion of looking down at the computer. I'd never thought about that before. I think that's a great tip that people again, I think of people in call centers where they're glued to the screen for so long, they
Hmm.
can just make sure that their chair is that little bit higher, looking down
A little
towards
bit
the
higher.
screen
Hmm.
would help. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think so they're really good strategies. Before we wind up, Valerie, this has been I could talk to you for hours, particularly going down a lot of the quantum biology stuff. But is there anything or any comments or options that you'd like to share that perhaps that I haven't covered before we wrap up?
I would say that Wi-Fi is something that we also have to be a little careful about. So if there's any way to
Hmm.
mitigate the Wi-Fi that we're exposed to, meaning we want to try not to wear, say, AirPods. And I know that's not a popular opinion. People love putting, AirPods in their ears or Apple Watches. All of that is putting Wi-Fi directly into our brain, into our skin.
Mm.
And those signals really do change our body. They're electrical and magnetic signals that we're not wired for. So that really does disrupt our cells.
Yep.
So we want to make sure when we're sleeping, that we're sleeping, when we are sleeping, it has to be dark. There has to be a sleep mask, dark room to really preserve sleep. And we don't want a phone near us if we can help it. Phones should be off. Even if you're exposed to a lot of even devices that are plugged in to the wall, are not good for us. I learned this recently and I didn't know, but if say a lamp is plugged into the wall and it's turned off, it's still generating an electrical and a magnetic current. So if it's by your head or your bed is right by an electrical outlets, you're getting these electrical signals while you're sleeping. So we want to make our bedrooms as safe as possible. So again, electrical, we want to be away from electricity, from Wi-Fi. You can turn off your router during sleep.
Yep.
That's a really good thing to do. The
Mm,
Wi-Fi router, I don't know if that's how
mm,
it works in Australia,
mm.
but we can just, I mean, my family doesn't like it, but we can just turn it off. Those are really important. Wi-Fi is something that we don't see, but it's a huge, huge issue. Almost worse than artificial blue light if we think about it. It's really bad, and we can't get around it. I'm trying to think of any other ways to mitigate that, but just whatever we can do, we can plug into computers instead of being wireless. Maybe use an Ethernet cable, which I don't do, and I should. But that would be helpful as well. Try to avoid even a mouse. A mouse and a computer that's wireless is getting Wi-Fi into our hands. So if we want to make sure it's wired, that can actually be helpful as well. So little things like that can make a big difference. Red light therapy is something that might be useful, especially for maybe night shift workers who are lacking that red and infrared. Sometimes red light therapy can be helpful. And the only other thing that we didn't touch upon is cold plunging. That's another way to really stimulate our body to maintain good mitochondrial function. And that's a whole other story that's a little difficult to do, but some people really do well with cold plunging. So that's another
Yeah.
avenue.
I think I've been doing a little bit of that. I'm a bit of a cold frog. I really struggle with it, but I feel amazing
Hmm.
afterwards. It's just getting
Right.
pushing to kind of do it. But I think we can start gently, can't we? With even if we're just putting a bit of cold water on our face, that
Right.
even just something like that can be beneficial, and it might be the last thing you
Hmm.
feel like doing in the middle of winter, but
Right.
it can certainly will
Absolutely.
help. But yeah. Well, gosh, this has been such a fantastic conversation, Valerie. As I said, I could talk to you for hours, and it's just wonderful to
Thank you.
have you on because I think the eyes they're such a underestimated organ when it comes to importance. Apart from the fact, obviously, it helps us to see, which is a big thing, but how it really
Hmm.
does control our whole biochemistry, our whole circadian timing system is huge, and so we need to be
Hmm.
doing whatever we possibly can to be protecting it as much as possible. But so for any of our listeners that want to get in touch, I know that you live over in New York, but I've got listeners all around the world, and I know that you probably have a social media presence. How can they get in touch with you?
So right now, I do have my YouTube channel. I have an Instagram page and an email. And I'm starting to work a little bit with clients separately outside of my practice, just from a quantum perspective.
Okay.
I don't really have I'm just starting to do, this is fairly new to me. So right
Yep.
now, again, I just have my YouTube, my Instagram,
Yep.
and my email, which is I
Yep.
think you have that information. Yes.
Yep. No
So you could
problem.
just reach out with email.
Yeah, no problem. I'll make sure that I pop that in the show notes for people so that they
Thank
know
you.
how to get in touch with you. But again, thank
Thank you.
you so much. I know we're on a bit of a time zone difference here. It's about nearly probably 8 o'clock for you, and it's just in the morning for me. So I
Oh,
appreciate that you've taken some extra time out of your day away from your family, and
of
I know that
course.
I
Thank
know
you
our
so
listeners are going
much.
to love it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. This was fun. Thank you.
Terrific.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you.